All right, so my name is Birgitta Jónsdóttir. I am a poetician, activist. I have started 2 political movements and got them into parliament in the last 9 years. I have formally quit party politics because it's cult. And I'm a mother, a single mom of 3, soon to be a grandma. And yeah, so I've been blessed with a lot of very intense life experiences.
Was one of the intense experiences involving a band called Crass?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think no other band and the whole concept around the band and the albums and the lyrics and their anarchistic experimentation with cooperatives like the Art Cooperative had a huge impact on me, led me to look into the philosophy of anarchism when I was very young, like 14, 15.
Yeah.
And I still, I can never get out. One of the albums had a poster inside with like a hand that's sort of stuck on a barbed wire that's sort of withered.
Yeah.
And and they had this really cool thing where, on the back of one of the big sort of boxes that I got, you could find all these different organizations to join. So they were really encouraging people to be engaged.
Yeah, totally. And this we're talking about the late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah.
Life changing for all of us at that time. Absolutely life changing.
Yeah. And if people see interviews and stuff with me, I have very, very top level stuff. I usually wear like a Crash pin.
Did you?
Yeah. Yeah, because it's important wherever you are to stay true to your roots. And like there is a saying, once a punk, always a punk.
True enough, without a doubt.
Yeah.
One of the things that you listed in your roles is that you were a poetician until recently. So can you tell us the reasons you've got for deciding it's time to stop being a parliamentarian?
Mm-hmm. Well, so I never intended to go into parliament. It was not on my sort of bucket list of things to do in life. I sort of stumbled in there accidentally as I was organizing grassroots events in the wake of the financial crisis. I became really, really interested in trying to get to change the system, and a lot of people thought you could do that from going inside, and so I also stumbled in on my first year into an event where Julian Assange and Daniel Domsberg were talking about Iceland could resurrect from this very terrible situation and sort of from being ridiculed all over the world as a country that would create the best possible laws for freedom of information, expression, and speech, and privacy. Sort of a data safe haven.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started to work a lot in that, in the parliament, and I managed to do things that nobody had done before in the parliament because we were in a crisis mode. So, and I got involved in, co-producing collateral murder, and I became a target of US authorities while I was in parliament. And, they wanted all my private information. And
I was going to ask, so what was it like being a target of the sort of military intelligence of the US? What was how did that manifest itself?
Well, they went after my metadata. And metadata is basically your digital self, your digital shadow. And so they called for, they demanded that Twitter would hand over all my private data. Background data that most people are not aware of, that is collected about them, who they're with, for how long, and where you're at, and so forth. And Twitter took it to court, and they were permitted to unseal this demand, so that I could take, the U.S. government to court to fight this.
Yeah.
And I did that with the ACLU and the EFF, and we of course lost. We knew we would lose, but we got some very important information, and we did not take it to the final sort of court level in the States because we didn't want to set like a negative standard.
Sure.
It feels I've been, as an activist, often surveilled by authorities.
I should think so.
And you know, I don't care about myself. I care about everybody else that's in contact with me, that are not assuming that our conversations are, you know, being listened into by a third agent.
Let's move on from the surveillance that obviously is natural to the kind of course of what you've been involved in.
But I have to say, it is very important that people recognize that there is a reason why privacy is usually a constitutional right. And the way we have given away our privacy for the corporations it's so stupid and ignorant, and it is going to come in our backs so bad. Like people that live in the States, for example, now, many of my fellow activists have been harassed by government for a long time. Now it's so easy for the government to find them, because and it's not their fault. It's because everybody else has handed over their own personal digital shadow to authorities.
Yes.
And we share a collective responsibility that we need to address and fix before it's too late.
Absolutely, absolutely. You were talking about originally how you did this journey from Crass to Julian Assange arriving to ending up as a poetician, now ending up as a politician. So what was the last stage of that? You were talking about WikiLeaks.
Well, I was
and
in Parliament.
murder.
I was in Parliament when I co-produced Collateral Murder. So Julian Assange had nothing to do with that.
So your first party was what?
It was like grassroots party, sort of a coalition of the grassroots movements. Its aim was to just get regular people into Parliament and to open the windows, to make people know what is going on in this sort of like secretive place where, you know, most people there, well, everyone that becomes a parliamentarian actually does a job interview with the nation, and then they conveniently forget who they're working for once they get there.
Absolutely.
But I also found, this is so disturbing, I found two very important sort of no's from the bottom of my heart. And one is that parliaments today are a cookie decoration. They don't have any power anymore. All the power is within the executive branch. You see it in Brussels, for example. A lot of people are aware of, you know, the executive branch in Brussels, and then you have the European Parliament, who can't even bring themselves to discuss the situation in Catalonia, you know, and we will move over to Catalonia very shortly. But who controls the world? It's not the parliamentarians, it's not even the ministers. People should watch Yes Minister as a documentary, a very depressing documentary. I can't even laugh anymore when I see it because it's too real.
It's true. Yeah.
It's too real, man. And so if we want to change anything, it's good to know how the system works. It's good to go and sort of hack into the system and analyze the flaws and weaknesses so that you can, once it collapses from its own stupid burden, it has something else to replace it with.
Sure.
Because that's always been the mistake of every person, communities, activists, is that they criticize, but they don't offer anything instead. And so we have a revolution, and then what? Nothing happens.
Absolutely.
So, you know, time to learn from the past.
Absolutely.
Right now.
But one of the things that's really exciting about your approach to all this was a while ago when you were talking about, very passionately as well, talking about how exciting it is the idea of ordinary people from every walk of life learning the process of legislation, which I found really extraordinary. This is about 4 years ago you were talking to me about this. And you were talking about that a little earlier today. And what the notion is that ordinary citizens, when informed, can do a far, far better job of the politicians that we have in regular politics. What came of that project? Because I know that you were having plumbers and bakers taking hours off and learning about the process of legislation. What was the long-term result of that research and those experiments?
Well, so one of the amazing things that happened after the crash was that a lot of people became really interested in stuff. So most people in Iceland became aware of what fractional reserve banking was.
Yeah.
You know, how awesome is that? Because, you know, before that, nobody knows what it is. It's like a huge scam.
Yeah.
And a lot of people became aware that we needed, you know, community banks again and so forth. However, because we adopted an EEA regulation, which was the gateway into the financial crash, without asking for amendments, we can't have a proper framework around community banks because they have to work within the framework of the big banks, as an example. So I found that the deeper I got in the system and the more I wanted to figure out ways for people to change it, I realized that you cannot possibly change it from inside. You may understand how it works, but you never know who writes what part of the laws. It is not transparent. So maybe the next project, next level of project of people understanding how the system works is a demand of dynamic law that are dynamic in the sense that it's easy to change them. It's easy to point out to the parliament that should be the fixer of laws, because the other process is really long. If you have to, an institution figures out there is a flaw in law, takes it to the minister decides to change the entire legal package, and it's going to take like 10 years to fix, you know, a terrible error. You know, a lot of people are dying in the UK, for example, because of draconian, horrible, dehumanizing laws when it comes to estimates on how much you can work after you have a heart attack. You know, whereas you should be resting, right?
Absolutely.
Or you will not get money to get basic stuff that the state is supposed to provide you with in dire straits. And so you're pushing people to such limits because of inhuman system. Now, if enough people would call for legal change, if it would be a transparent way, so you as the general public could lobby for a certain legal change, that would completely change trust towards politics and take this excuse from the parliament that it can't do anything because you're not the majority and so forth, or the minister is in control, whereas he's not in control. So we need to know how the laws are made, who writes them, and then we need to have ways to amend them, because they're not written in stone and they are always going to be errors. And actually I would, you know, almost prefer to have like these 10 commandments or whatever, you know, as the law, instead of trying to write into the laws everything, because you're always going to have people that are trying to abuse laws. And those are usually not the disabled people, the people that are skimming billions and billions of whatever dollars or pounds or euros. They are the respectable people of our societies.
Highly able, highly paid corporate lawyers, etc.
Yeah, not only that, I mean, they're encouraging the Queen to, you know, have assets in paradises, you know, for the few. So it's like, you know, but at the same time, we have, if enough people would understand the importance of separating casino banking from ordinary banking, for example, then that law could be changed, and people will then live with the threats and the consequences. If they're willing to take, like we did with iSafe, like the nation did not want to pay this private debt, and we were under a lot of threat. And even if we would have lost, we would at least have that collective responsibility as a nation, instead of being able to point the finger at somebody. And for me, this is fundamental. So if you want to be engaged, you take risks, you know, you have to, and then you collectively either reap the benefits or you take the responsibility of making you know, an error, because like the general public is not like super wise. Nobody is super wise. Everybody makes errors. God, I've made so many great errors. I'm so proud of it.
I'm so proud of it. We're here in Madrid for a sort of a conference around democratic cities, it's called, and it's connected to the municipalist movement. So when you gave your speech earlier on, you were talking about I've come to the conclusion that it is about the cities.
Mm-hmm.
So can you explain a little bit more about how you came to that conclusion and what you can see this movement going towards?
Well, so on the state level, it's like they can always hide, like they're doing in Spain now, behind it's unconstitutional, and then they make constitutions in such a way that you can't possibly change them, right? If you have a constitution, that is. I mean, some countries don't even have it. And so, but the cities can make their own, the people of the cities can make their own constitutions, like they did in Mexico City. And I just heard about it, and it's fantastic. So
I just heard about that today for the first time.
I was at this conference in Seoul, and one of the people that have been behind a lot of the transformation of Mexico City. It's amazing stuff happening there.
Right.
But you never hear about all these projects unless you are in this sort of geeky environment that we are in. However, I have to say that I am seeing a very infectious virus spreading, and it's this virus of enough people going inside all these different cracks in the systems to open pathways for the general public to be more engaged.
Are you seeing this globally?
Yes, absolutely. It's happening everywhere.
And it's digitally informed, or?
Both. I mean, you have experimentations on different fronts. So you have a massive scale prototypes of basic income, basic income, not the capitalistic version.
Yeah, very important difference.
Yes,
exactly.
And in Kenya and India and so forth. And it's not the way, it won't work exactly the same way everywhere, because there's no one solution to everything. So they're doing experimentation there. I just heard there's been massive changes in the government of Sri Lanka, where they just implemented a very powerful Freedom of Information Act. And so we're always seeing these, how can we support different, progressive elements that are trying to amend for maybe horrible pasts and so forth, because that's why I'm obsessed with this idea of creating like this international database of the best practice laws, for the fundamental laws, because I feel even if the United Nations agree on something, or the Council of Europe, most of the stuff is not even translated to different languages, let alone implemented. And the way you implement a lot of the UN stuff is it's sort of woven in a really long period of time.
Yeah.
So many people assume that they have it, but they have agreed to do it, but not implemented. So it's like all these loopholes of trickery that we need to go beyond and help one another, because I'm seeing the virus of citizen engagement through various formats of democracy happening.
It's fantastic to hear you say that. That's great. Tell us a little bit more about why you left politics, Birgitta.
Well, I had a very serious burnout this summer, and I just discovered that it was more pain to go to work than not. So it was not, I just felt I was really bored, and then I had been analyzing my party a little bit, and I realized that all the parties, including my own, as soon as you get in there, it's sort of like the Lord of the Rings thing. The ring is just like power, and as soon as people get a whiff of this power, it infiltrates their personality. It's really creepy, and I didn't want to become like that. Gollum is the Gollum for me is such a strong warning sign, right? Yeah. You just like, ugh. Anyway, so I felt it was like a cult, like a religious organization. You see, it's like whenever somebody leaves the Church of Scientology, he's a traitor, and they try to sort of like isolate. You become very isolated within this.
This is not happening to you because you've left in Iceland, is it?
No. I mean, it's like no, not at all. I try to do this really, gracefully towards others, because even if I feel like this, I don't hold the ultimate truth. It's just the way I experience it. So whenever people don't fit in the ideology or the way different parties are swaying. You can see this, like the left Greens are trying to justify that they are in government negotiations with the Conservative Party, a feminist party negotiating with the party that is everything but, and a very strong divided cultures, and it's going to be very funny to see how they will justify this more, because or sad. So the thing is like, I don't know, I used to have this guru, or not the guru, I used to go to these workshops with this American New Age guy when I was 20 something.
Oh yeah.
And I challenged him, but everyone else were like, whenever somebody quit the group, it was a lot of negativity, a lot of negative talk about this person. And to make it worse, the group believed if you would be sending negative energy to this person, right? Whenever you're talking negatively about them, it's just like a horrible thing. And at the same time, they were pretending they're super spiritual. And so, I challenged this, and of course, I had to leave the group free willingly, but I challenged the leader of the group, and I think I can't be in a group. I don't care if it's a political group, a religious group, or a Buddhist group, or whatnot, or environmental group. I will always challenge authority. I'm born with this thing. It's very difficult to be like this, but you still have to. I think everyone should always challenge authority. Whenever somebody is behaving in an authoritarian way, you should challenge it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's better to be an outcast than conformist.
So a supplicant, or conformist.
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
But look, there's so many brilliant young people on fire in this in the UK at the moment with all of that feelings that we have to challenge authority, and we've been dealt the worst set of hand of cards that ever been dealt. But there was also a very, very strong feeling of powerlessness, and
yes.
it's a real sort of problem for young people in that we really want to see change. We really feel we can't do anything, and I'd really love you to kind of say a few lines that could feed them.
Yes. Okay. So I managed to almost become Prime Minister in Iceland, still being always challenging authority, and it doesn't mean like the trick is, you have to be engaged, and you have to be curious, and you have to be willing to go inside the belly of the beast. You have to be willing to buy a share in the Coca-Cola Corporation, a small one, so you get to go to the shareholder meetings. You have to play the game like they, but not become the game, so that you can change the game. And so you can be a shapeshifter. There's so much power in that, to put on the corporate dress, if you know what I mean. Like, for example, I've always, dressed in dresses and stuff like that. But everything I buy on sales or secondhand, even when I was a member of parliament. Because I'm not going to be, I will play their game in their, old clothes. I will not be like, I will not buy into the sort of the capitalistic trends that you have to, become really deeply indebted and so forth. So whenever I stay, whenever I stay at hotels, I always buy like a bouquet and bring my own coffee. Even if I'm in a 4-star hotel.
You always buy a bouquet of flowers?
No, bread. Like I buy some
bread.
friends bread,
yes,
hummus, and I, rather than go and eat out, I eat in my room, because it's integrated in me that it's so important to not to become like a total debt slave. It is very important to figure out ways to survive, and it's very difficult. I have been so dirt poor most of my life by choice. I don't care. I don't care if I have lots of money or no money, as long as I'm happy. And so I could have stayed in Parliament and had a relatively easy life, in a sense. I could sort of eased out and just done the book on my mother while I was in Parliament. Like a lot of people are doing their own pet projects while they're in service.
Yes.
But I just can't do it.
Yes.
I just can't. And so if you maintain your integrity, being a young, passionate person, if you never take on and become whatever shape-shifting thing you do, then you're a brilliant double agent. Because we need people to go inside to understand how it works, but then they have to remain, they cannot assimilate. So you have to have done some shit for yourself first. You have to also have a strong, broken people that go in, they get sucked into it. They get destroyed.
Yeah.
They are the people that become the worst. You saw the hippie movement when they all became like, they all went in.
Breadheads.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's like, we don't want that, and it's very important to step out and do, not to become assimilated into it.
Sure. I mean, so in a way, two things. One is the advice for those young people who feel powerless is you ended up becoming a Prime Minister of Iceland, and you don't come from any heavy degrees in politics and super privileged background or anything. And even when you were in Parliament, you still made the point of not becoming those people and buying Armani suits. You still went to Oxfam instead. Okay, so anyone could do that, which is really, really important.
Yeah, and you don't have to become like that.
No. So it's infiltrate and subvert, which is what the Crass used to talk about.
Exactly.
But the second thing is also the word assimilation. So I remember I was talking to you earlier on this year, and you were talking about leaving politics, and you said simply, because there's a certain amount of time, and after that you become assimilated into it. So let's move on to municipalism, because we have a situation now where we have activists who are becoming the mayors of cities around the world, not just in Spain. And I've been speaking to some people who are in Aurora Madrid, who are working in Aurora Madrid, and they've been saying it's already a problem, that people are changing and becoming assimilated into that system, even at city level. You've had a lot more experience than I have with this movement. So are you seeing people taking rational precautions to not become assimilated, or are you seeing them already beginning to lose their way while they get sucked into the system?
No, people are not taking enough.
They're not taking enough precaution.
No, and I think maybe I could just, one of the things I could do is to help people, figure out how not to get assimilated.
I think that's one of the most important things you've got to offer this movement, to be honest.
Because I've seen my own people get sucked in, and the worst thing that I experience with people is that, and particularly young people, is that they don't want to be mentored. They don't want anyone to teach them. And so they have to get out of this ego phase, or we lose tremendous opportunities. I learn and am inspired from all types of people, young and old and my age. And the best advice I could give anyone is to look at what people do that you look up to, model yourself to the best version of yourself. Do not, when you fuck up, which always happens in these things, do not try to excuse it by pointing at somebody that did worse.
Which is what happens usually.
So,
So it's more powerful to admit it. I've fucked up, and this is how I've done it, and my hands up. I take responsibility, and I'm going to learn from it, rather than it wasn't my fault.
Or that person did much, like the person from this party did much worse.
But that's ego-based sort of ways of behaving.
Yeah, and I mean, it's important if you go into these things to apply, practical Buddhism. Practical Buddhism #1 is to understand that you have no idea if something is a curse or a blessing. In the big picture, you have no idea.
True. Yeah.
And so, and then there is the most powerful thing I had in Parliament was that I did not care if I didn't have this job anymore. I did not believe that I could save Iceland. But I believe that there is a necessary for us to seek wisdom from one another. And that's why I wanted to create the tools for the general public to have more impact.
Sure.
And the obligation for whomever is in office, I don't care if it's in a city or a state or United Nations, people have to be willing to let it all go.
Yeah.
And understand that they are not going to solve it alone. And we have to make sure that that it's meaningful for me and you to be engaged. You know, for the general public, it's so good to be back into being the general public. And I hugely admire people that are willing to sacrifice themselves to be in these positions.
Yes.
But they have to understand that this is service, always service.
Absolutely. The word that they use in Spain is proximity, and it's really interesting because it's repeated here and it's repeated in Barcelona with the Fearless Cities, and it's a brilliant way of looking at it, which is you have to remain. The way that Ada Colau puts it is, you know, when you come into power, before us, you would be in the top of a tower and you'd look down at everyone else and you'd tell them all what to do. Mm-hmm. Proximity means that you never lose touch with the participatory democracy aspect of it, as in they have weekly meetings in all the areas in Barcelona, face to face. And a lot of the people in the conference today are talking about the importance of never losing contact with having face to face relationships with all the people and listening to them and using the kind of face to face democracy as well as digital democracy.
Yeah, I mean, you have to have both. You cannot have only sort
digital.
Of, no, because you know, then it becomes a little bit like some sort of Star Trek episode.
With this municipalist movement, one of the things that's really attractive for myself as an internationalist is the fact that they are addressing neoliberalism as a global problem, and they're addressing one of the worst effects of neoliberalism, which is climate change, the biggest threat that this species has ever faced. Can you see this municipalist movement successfully taking on neoliberalism?
They have far more chance than if you try to do it on state level. Far more.
Great.
And, you know, the thing is that, you know, I'm not a big fan of huge cities, but we have, you know, we're not going to get everybody to move back into the countryside. You know, it's just not happening. So there is a gravitation and attraction to cities. And so, you know, how do you make cities function so that they are actually working for everyone living in it? And I would love to see more of these sort of, you know, great assemblies where you randomly select people from every part of the city to have a discussion about how they want the city to be. You know, if this was a country, how would you like your city country to be?
Like you did with your constitution in Iceland, right?
Yeah. So then you could actually get also the people that hardly never meet anyone, like people that are, you know, immigrants that are sort of isolated in, you know, the ghettos in suburbia in Iceland, for example. I would like to hear and learn from them, and they could learn from us, and it could be, you know, deeply healing, I think, for cities. And then I think also you could, with the cities, they don't have as much deep sort of red tapes. And you have seen there's been movements like the mayors to ban nuclear weapons. That's like, you know, almost all mayors in big cities, you know, have, in Europe at least, have denounced, said they want nuclear weapons in their cities. And so if we would have more projects like that, where you have mayors, you know, commit to something, maybe environmental issues or something like that, or all mayors would say, we don't want any military vessels in our harbors, or something like that. I mean, or we don't want to any cobalt from Congo or blood diamonds in our harbors.
Sure.
You know, there's lots of ways where you can unify people through townships and cities rather than always on the state level. And then the more you do this, the less opportunities it is for this big, I don't know, it's just so funny, all the attention always by the international media is on ministers. And they are sort of like, it's just like they're royalties for a brief period of time and embalmed with this fake power. And they're not interested in, you know, the people that actually should really have the power. That's why I wanted, when I had the opportunity to seek to be Prime Minister, I had an idea that I would take that ideal power and bring it into the Parliament by seeking to be the Speaker of the House to find ways so that we could work on future stuff together, long-term stuff, with every member of parliament, instead of this fake idea. But it's just in our heads. It's not real, you know. None of this is real. We all make it up. Just like we make laws, we can undo laws.
Absolutely.
And we need to. I used to work in a fish factory. You know, I did not work there for long. I was too much of a troublemaker.
Why does that not surprise me?
And so one of the things you do in a fish factory is that you clean out worms. So we would sort of pick out the worms in the fish, right? And so parliamentarians are supposed to be cleaning the worms out of the laws. Now there are much more efficient ways to do that, don't you think?
That's great. Well, listen, as always, it's such a pleasure to see you, and thanks for giving us this time, and thanks for editing New Internationalist. 2014, that was the Digital Democracies, you know.
Yeah, I love to do that, and I am also I really love the New Internationalist, and papers like this, they're just so precious. That go actually deep into stories. It's so rare nowadays. So I discovered so many interesting things in it. I love these sort of themes. You know, it's good.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, it's like reading an interesting modern book.
It really is. Yeah. That's smashing. Well, thanks a lot, and thanks for watching, folks. See you soon.